So welcome back everybody, this is Paul again from 2012crossing.com, and I made a series about numbers and creation, and this is the second in the series here. And I was talking in the earlier series about the basics of, you take a theoretical infinite, say a sphere, and you imagine, conceptualize a situation where something like that were to divide through the influence of a certain small amount of vibration that's set up, and then it divides and it grows. Now, is there anything like that in our life? And all the cell division exactly reproduces a very, very fundamental operation. And we were discussing that in the previous segment. Now, calculating motion is something that, for example, Isaac Newton spent a whole lot of time trying to figure out how to calculate the motion, and he came up with calculus. And that is just incredible, because the ancient people, they didn't use our decimal system. They used the 360 degrees, basically kind of base 60. You can divide up into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 24, and 30. There's a whole bunch of divisors of that number, 360. And it makes for easier calculations that end up, for example, in even numbers rather than what we have is a decimal that goes on for infinity, basically, in certain situations. For example, we have calculations that go, use 1 over 0, 1 over 1, 1 over 2, 1 over 3, and the inverse, and so on, and they add up to certain proportions, and we use those particular numbers. Many of them are repeating, like, or non-repeating, like 1.618 for the golden section, golden mean. But there's different kinds of functions that we use with our base 10 system. But it just so happens that for calculating orbits and times and cycles, it is very convenient to use the 360 degree calculation system. And I find that incredibly fascinating. That was discovered such a very long time ago. Now, in the process of something spinning, what happens is certain shapes, depending on the frequency, certain shapes start to take into, they start to manifest. For example, you might have triangles, you might have a tetrahedron, you might have various kinds of situations like that where the movement produces certain shapes. Now, if something moves and creates a shape in basically a spin motion, apparently after some time, it starts attracting actual physical matter in some very obscure process of how, after it's spinning, and depending on what kind of spin motion it has, and it'll attract certain kinds of particles depending on the ratios and the frequencies, and then we have what unfolds, for example, a flower, or DNA, or our eye, or our hand, or clouds, or anything that actually exists. So this type of mathematics, investigating the harmonies and proportions and shapes, is incredibly fascinating, because you can visualize a shape. You can see, that's the nice thing about the computer-generated stuff we have these days. You can actually visualize finally all those weird equations that people study, and you look in a book, and I remember taking my math classes many years ago, And you look at those books and go, wow, man, I just can't figure this out. You have to think and think and think and try to visualize and use graph paper and make drawings and so on. And nowadays, just at the click of your fingers, you have all kinds of amazing visualizations and graphics and so on. So we can take advantage of that on the internet to learn all about this amazing, amazing stuff, the symmetry, the scales, the relationship, the dynamics, the spins, the shapes, the multiples, the processes which make us actually be able to exist. And my contention is that this has been known for a long, long time. If you read things from Egypt a long time ago, Hermetica, they were talking about stuff like this. Probably the reason that we can't interpret all the hieroglyphics in Egypt is because we don't know what the hell they were talking about. We think it's a religion, maybe it was science. Basically, there was their version of science with those weird symbols saying, okay, you know, this is this type of energy, and this is this type of energy, and this is what this type of energy does, and this is how it does it. So they used animals, or they used stories, but they might actually have something to say if you look carefully at the mythology and so on. Now, all the ancient cultures that I've seen, all the sophisticated things, okay, way, way back in China, way, way back in South America, way, way back up in Europe and England, way all around the world in India and Egypt, there are people who study the stars, they made these calculations, they made these drawings, they made these imaginary, they visualized motion, they designed these scales, they designed these math systems. They're pretty darn smart people. So smart that the same teachings that they taught long time ago are still being taught and applied in modern science. Now, I encourage people to get into some serious book reading here, because there's a book here called The Credibium, and this book, once upon a time, was like this. You don't go to school or get any kind of decent education unless you study this stuff. Number, geometry, music, and cosmology. You got to know how stuff works. The big stuff, the little stuff, all the kind of stuff. You got to figure it out. You got to know the proportions. You got to know the math. You got to know something. You got to be able to visualize. Incredible book. Very old book. So-called alchemy, yes, okay, it's weird, but it's symbolism. There's principles involved. Some of it's weird, some of it is inaccurate, yes, but there are basically some really smart people who design some interesting symbols. They try to convey principles in symbolic language such that people who understood what they're talking about through the symbols would actually figure out how things work. Now here's a book called The Magic of Tone and the Art of Music by Dane Ridyar. Again, the musical proportions, math, how things work, the beauty that we actually hear, the beauty that we actually see is a harmonious display of creative energy with some kind of spin guaranteed, and a harmonious spin is what makes us harmonious. So again, this is a very, very fascinating subject to investigate. I really, really encourage people to watch people like Santos, Bonacci, and look into electrical activity, electrical universe theory, look into the ancient cosmology, hermetics, ancient Egypt. Don't look at it as, okay, look, it's evil, oh my God, it's a cult. No, it's how things work. Back then it was strange. There were weird people who were into this because they were the smart people. But a lot of the stuff that's come down to us now, we put it into perspective with modern science, and we understand a lot better. And I'm trying to explain to people, it's not voodoo stuff. There's actually a lot of really intelligent thought that has gone into so-called esoteric systems of number and theory and cosmology and so on. So thanks again for watching. I encourage feedback. I'd love to see other people's content, and I'll see you in the next video.